Okay, welcome back to the Mental Toughness Podcast.org. Remember to subscribe to the Mental Toughness Podcast.org. You'll get an email every week with a new episode so you don't miss a single episode. Oh my God, you don't want to miss a single episode, hopefully. Okay, all right, so today I want to talk about a topic that no one usually likes to talk too much about, and this is critical, and especially for kids. If you coach kids in mental toughness or you have kids, and you're trying to bring them up the right way, especially when it comes to competition, which is sometimes very misunderstood. You know, as a young kid, I started competing at the national level as a tennis player when I was 6 and 7 years old, right in that neighborhood. And I had half the people telling me, winning is not everything, it's the only thing. Winning is it's life, you know, you either win or you lose. And you're like, I'm 7 years old. I just want to play the game. I don't even care about winning. I just want to hit this tennis ball. It just feels cool to push people around on the court and see how far you can make them run. And eventually they miss, and I win the game. I win the point, and it's fun. You know, it's like here's this little kid wanting to play, and they go, you got to win, and you got to be tough, and you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to be strategic. You're like, shut up. I just want to play. Leave me alone. You know, they don't do this when I'm in the sandbox playing with army men and stuff like that. But when I'm at tennis court, everyone wants to tell me winning is not the only thing. It's everything. It's not the only thing, whatever that saying is. So there's a lot of confusion that goes on. And some parents, you know, are like winning. And other parents are like, oh, it doesn't matter. Winning doesn't matter. Just play the game. And, you know, winning in life doesn't matter. Everybody gets a trophy. And then there's that, you know, kind of philosophy. And a lot of people disagree with that. I was just on a TV show a couple hours ago, and the host was talking about that and about this concept of, oh, everybody gets a trophy, and we're turning out all these weak snowflake kids because they've never had to put their nose to the grindstone and really try to win at something or succeed at something or achieve something. And, you know, I don't know so much about that. I think every generation wants to say the last generation was weak and they're strong. You know, so I get, it's like, you know, everybody, you know, you hear your parents say, well, I walked to school 3 miles, you know, uphill both ways in the snow. And then because they heard their parents say it, and then the next generation says it. And, you know, every generation is better than the next. It's like a competition or something. And I think some of it's ridiculous, but, you know, I don't think it's a big competition between generations, but there probably is something to be said for philosophy especially when you're teaching kids about winning and losing in competition. And so what I want to do is just get to the heart of it. When a kid or anyone for that matter is winning, this isn't the problem. It's learning how to lose. Learning how to win is easy, right? Feels great to win. We get the trophy and everyone's chanting your name. It's not hard to be happy. You can't really do anything wrong. Everyone loves you. Everyone thinks you're great. Everyone's cheering your name and, you know, saying nice things to you. But when you lose, it's the opposite. Now you have to deal with criticism. You have to deal with people saying, well, you know, you didn't try hard enough. Well, you know, you kind of let down emotionally. It seems like you almost gave them some point. I don't think you tried hard enough. You just didn't concentrate. I think that's where was your head? These are all things that are said to people that lose in competition, especially sports. It's the most linear thing. It happens in business too, but let's just say sports. I worry more about the kids we're coaching or the kids we're raising, because once you're an adult, I probably, you know, if you're an athlete, you're probably an adult psychologically at a very young age, probably 12 or 13, if you've dealt at a high competitive level, because you've learned to reconcile losing. You learn to deal with it in a certain way, and you've developed a philosophy. But if you weren't real competitive as a kid, it probably takes you till you're 18 or 20 or maybe something like that, where you develop a philosophy and you say, look, this is how I see winning. This is how I see losing. This is how I see competition. Macro speaking, this is how I see the world. And then you navigate through winning, losing, competition, the world accordingly. But when you're a little kid, you don't. You don't know how to, you just know what people tell you because you're just trying to do the best you can. And you don't have any experience to draw from which to draw. So it's confusing. And I think if we teach kids, whether we're coaching them, parenting them, whatever it is, to learn to lose, and a lot of adults need to learn to do this too, frankly. I mean, they never did learn how to lose. They never developed a philosophy, and it's kind of sad. You see adults out there, taking things so seriously. I think back to women's tennis. My wife plays women's tennis. I taught her to play tennis years ago when I was a tennis pro, and she's actually truthfully speaking, I kid her, but truthfully speaking, she's actually very, very good at this. Because I think she's just really smart and she knows how to navigate it emotionally. But a lot of the women over the years that she's played on these teams with team tennis, like USTA is the United States Tennis Association. If you're not a tennis player, they're one of the biggest leagues, recreational leagues in the whole world, and they play these, they have these teams of different levels and they compete. And my wife plays on 2 or 3 teams, here in Atlanta, and they have Alta here in Atlanta, the Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association League, which is a huge league of like 100,000 people. And the people that go the craziest when they lose are the women. Not the kids, not the men, the women. And I think probably it's kind of a joke among tennis pros that these suburban women that are middle-aged, they've never played a sport in their life, they've never competed in their life, and they think they think they're playing Wimbledon every time, and they can barely get the ball off the net, and they go berserk when they lose, they go berserk when they play number 4 position instead of number 3 position, and they're yelling at the coach, and they fire the coach, and it's just it's almost a big joke, except it's really not that funny. What they haven't done is they've never learned how to compete. They've never developed the flow. They have no experience from which to draw. So they come up with this very unhealthy approach to winning and losing and competition. Luckily for me, my wife, I never taught her it. I taught her that. I mean, she was an adult, obviously, when I met her, but so she never had the problem. She laughs through the whole thing. She's a real fierce competitor, but she doesn't take it very seriously. She's very smart with that. But a lot of them aren't. And I would say, well, I won't say most, but I'll just say a lot of them. I mean, this is a joke, a national joke among tennis pros at every club I know in the country. And I've played at hundreds of tennis clubs around the country for all these years, and they all joke about it. This is the longest running joke in tennis pro history, probably. About how these women just take this so seriously. They think this competition is the biggest thing, and they can barely get the ball over the net, and they think it's the biggest thing in the world, and they get very tense and all these things, and they don't know how to lose. Now, is that a problem in general? No, it's more of a joke. But the problem is their kids are watching. And what do kids do? They do what they see. They do what you do. Monkey see, monkey do. That's what kids do. I mean, we learn from each other, right? It's like in the animal kingdom. We're part of the animal kingdom for that matter, right? It's like when I used to study tigers, because I had this tiger program years ago, so I studied the jungle tiger extensively. I mean, not extensively like a zoologist, but just, enough to give speeches about it and talk about the jungle tiger. I was kind of fascinated with the jungle tiger. And they say, that's one of the things I remember from the study was, and from my speeches from the years ago, was the only effective teacher for a tiger is another tiger. They have to learn from each other. They watch each other, just like kids watch parents. And we're part of the animal kingdom. The little tiger watches the big tiger, right? Human beings are part of the animal kingdom. And so what do? The little person watches the big person, they say, and they behave accordingly. So the kids are watching these, in tennis at least, the tennis mothers go berserk when they lose and yell at the tennis pro and try to get the tennis pro at the club fired because he played her in front of, Jane instead of her in first position because, he's sleeping with Jane at the club or, some nonsense reason or some stupid thing. This happens all the time. You think I'm exaggerating if you're not a tennis player, but I'm really not. If you are a tennis player, this. It's ridiculous, but it is what it is. So it transfers to the kids. They watch you, the parent. They watch the as we all do, and the older people, and they behave accordingly. So they develop this unhealthy relationship with competition, specifically with losing. You got to learn how to lose. If you're an adult, they're watching you. If you have kids, if you're coaching kids, you better be the best loser that you possibly can be. And when I mean best, I mean gracious. I'll tell you, that's one thing I've always been proud of. One of the things I should say I've always been proud of as a tennis player, watching professional tennis players and being one of, at some point for a couple of years. But also my fellow competitors. Tennis is for the most part, there are exceptions. I know. Back in the 70s, we had Ely Nastasi. He was a bad boy. John McEnroe was a bad example. He was a bratty player, a bratty guy back then. I think he's grown up some now, hopefully. But back then, not so much. We had Jimmy Connors was a jerk on the court. There were some jerks. But for the most part, tennis players are classy. They're good losers. Oh, believe me, they hate losing. They do. They're at that level, they don't like to lose. But they're in control. They're mentally tough enough to be in control of their emotions, to be gracious when they do lose. That's class. And that's what you're teaching kids because they're watching. That's why, when people thought, well, it's funny that McEnroe acted back then like an idiot on the court. He's throwing his racket, he's breaking things. His emotional immaturity led a lot of kids to doing that because I was a junior player when he was just going into the pros, and Patrick, his brother, was in my age division, and I remember kids emulating McEnroe, not Patrick, but John, because he was acting like a jerk, and they were breaking rackets and doing stuff I never saw them do before McEnroe arrived at Wimbledon in, I think it was 1977. They started emulating their hero, who was acting like an idiot, and he blows that off, and I don't think he's ever really taken response. I'm not beating up McEnroe. He's a great player and everything, and I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he did a disservice to a lot of children, and he should have been emotionally mature enough to know that little kids were watching. And he, as someone who made a fortune, probably the only way he could have ever made a fortune was through tennis. For most people, they got one shot. That's not a put down to John McEnroe, but it's just for any of us, you usually get one shot. We don't usually get two shots to make a multi-million-dollar fortune. That was his shot, and he took it, and he was a great player, and he deserved it and all that. But a game that made him a multimillionaire, he did a disservice to a lot of kids growing up because I was one of those little kids. I didn't emulate McEnroe. I thought he was a jerk, so I didn't. But a lot of kids did. My parents would have never put up with that kind of behavior. So I couldn't anyway, even if I would have wanted to. But he did. And it hurt a lot of kids. And so did Jimmy Connors, and so did Ely Nastasi and other people like that. But most of those guys, and I played Borg, I played Rod Laver, I played Ken Rosewall in exhibitions and people like that. And they never did that. They were class. And you look at Novak Djokovic for the most part, and he's got some issues, but he's a class guy. Rafael Nadal's class. Roger Federer. These guys, when they win, they're classy. When they lose, they're classy. And they're gracious losers. They hate losing. Everyone does, especially people at that level. I mean, they are fierce competitors, but they're emotionally tough enough. They're mentally tough enough to act like a good person and be classy when they lose. And that's something to look up to. It's something to emulate. It's something we need to teach kids. It's not, I hear parents and coaches make excuses, say, see, he behaves or he misbehaves like this as an athlete or a sports competitor, whether it's football or baseball or tennis or golf or whatever, because he wants to win so bad that he just can't. Yeah, I heard this, years growing up. In the National Junior Tennis Circuit, parents used to make excuses for their kids because they acted like idiots. And they'd say, well, he wants to win so bad, he just can't control himself. Well, that's the parent's fault. It's a kid. You tell him to control himself or he doesn't play. We had parents like that who pulled kids off the court when they didn't behave the right way. I remember I smacked my racket on the court one day during a tournament. My dad, and I was like 10 or 12 years old. My dad put my rackets up on the top of the closet where I couldn't reach, and I couldn't play for a month. He said, you ever crack that racket that I paid for again on the court, you'll never play again. You'll never play until you leave my house. And my dad wasn't kidding. He was a football player for University of Illinois. He was a big dude. His arms were bigger than my legs are right now. He was a monster. He's a big dude. And so he didn't really fool around with him. When he said something, he said it once, and he didn't want to have him come back and say it twice. He didn't really, kid. He didn't bluff much. He looked at me and I said, okay, and I never did it again. Because he was a good parent. He knew how to stop something in its tracks, and he did. And that was for my benefit. And I was a good competitor. I was a classy competitor when I lost. And I felt like I wasn't always the best, but I was pretty good, because I was taught that way. And I think you got to teach kids how to lose. That's the bottom line. And if you're not a great example and you're a parent or a coach, you better learn how to lose yourself. Because if you don't, they're watching and they're going to do what you do, not what you say. And you already know that. And that's what little people do. They watch big people. That's how we all learn. So you've got to be a role model. I don't care how much it hurts. And then teach them how to lose, how to be classy when they lose, because how they lose will determine how long it is again before they win. And then remember, most of these kids are never going to make penny one in professional sports. I don't care how great they are. All these parents, oh, my kid is going to be the next Venus Williams. My kid is going to be the next Rafael Nadal or, Tiger Woods or Tom Brady, whomever. They're not. Okay, statistically speaking, you're living in Disneyland. They're not. 1 in 20 million will. Okay, but the rest of us are mere mortals. They're going to go out into the world, and the way they learn to compete and lose is the way they will lose, most likely, in business. If they throw a tantrum in sports, they'll throw a tantrum in the boardroom, right, or in the classroom, or wherever they are, and it's not a good thing. So, just to wrap this in a bow, I think you get the concept. Teach them how to learn to lose. They need to learn how to learn. They need to learn to lose, and you need to teach them how you do it in a class. You control your emotions. Yes, you want to win. You lose. You lose sometimes. It's part of it. Be a gracious loser and a gracious winner. You don't rub it in to anyone when you win, and you don't act like a worm or a baby when you lose. You suck it up, and you did the best you could, and you try it again next time. That's it. It's a game, as life is. And you do that, and people see you in a very different light. And you already know this as an adult, but kids don't know it until you teach them. Okay? So think about that. Teaching kids to learn to lose. Very important. Okay. Again, thanks for watching and listening to the Mental Toughness Podcast. Subscribe at mentaltoughness.org, and we'll see you next time.